In the year 476, on a September morning in Ravenna, a 16-year-old boy handed over his crown. His name was Romulus Augustulus, Little Augustus, and he was, officially, the last emperor of Rome. No battle was fought that day. No senate debated. A Germanic commander named Odoacer simply told him it was over, packed the imperial robes onto a ship, and sent them to Constantinople. And with that quiet, almost bureaucratic gesture, 12 centuries of Roman history seemed to end. Except it didn't. Not really. Because right now, whatever country you are watching this from, you are still living inside Rome's shadow, whether you know it or not. To understand how that is possible, we have to go back to the beginning. Not the myth of Romulus and Remus and the she-wolf, though that story mattered enormously to how Romans saw themselves, but to the actual archaeology. Around 1000 BCE, small huts appeared on a hill beside the Tiber River in central Italy. Over the following centuries, more hills were settled, then joined. By around 509 BCE, the Romans had overthrown their last king and declared something radical for the ancient world: a republic, governed not by one man but by elected officials and a senate, with checks built in to prevent any single person from holding too much power. For nearly 500 years, that republic expanded, conquering Italy, then Carthage, then Greece, then much of the Mediterranean world. But conquest brought wealth, and wealth brought inequality, and inequality bred ambition. By the 1st century BCE, Rome's own success was tearing its government apart. Enter Julius Caesar, brilliant general, shrewd politician, and, ultimately, a threat to the very system he served. In 49 BCE, ordered by the Senate to disband his army, Caesar refused. He marched his legions across the Rubicon River into Italy itself, a direct act of civil war. He won. The Senate named him dictator for life. And then, on the Ides of March in 44 BCE, a group of senators, fearing he would become a king in all but name, stabbed him to death on the Senate floor. They thought they were saving the Republic. Instead, they destroyed it completely. Within 17 years, he had outmaneuvered every rival, defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium. Within 17 years, he had outmaneuvered every rival, defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium, and, in 27 BCE, accepted a new title from the Senate, Augustus. The Republic was, technically, still standing. In reality, Rome now had an emperor. This moment is the hinge of the entire story, the point where Rome stopped being a republic and became an empire. And it opened roughly 200 years of relative peace and staggering growth, known as the Pax Romana. This is where Rome stopped simply being powerful and started becoming permanent. Because it was during this imperial period that Rome built the things that would outlast it. Roman engineers constructed a road network so extensive that by the year 200, it stretched over 50,000 miles, connecting the empire from Britain to the Euphrates. Their aqueducts moved water using nothing but gravity and precise engineering, carrying it dozens, sometimes over 100 kilometers, into cities, feeding public baths, fountains, and private homes. And they invented something extraordinary, a form of concrete made from volcanic ash that could set and strengthen even underwater. That concrete built the Pantheon's dome, still the largest unreinforced concrete dome on Earth, and the Colosseum, both of which are still standing, nearly 2,000 years later. But Rome's most enduring invention was not physical, it was legal. Roman jurists developed detailed, written codes covering property, contracts, and citizenship, refined over centuries, and eventually compiled under Emperor Justinian into a text called the Corpus Juris Civilis. Centuries after Rome fell, medieval scholars rediscovered that text and used it to rebuild European law from the ground up. Today, most of the world's civil law systems, across Europe, Latin America, and beyond, trace their structure directly back to Roman legal thinking. That roughly a quarter of the English words you know are of Latin origin. In concepts like legal precedent and equity. And then there is language. The Romans spread Latin and its alphabet across their entire empire. Latin eventually splintered into French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. English, though technically a Germanic language, absorbed so much Latin vocabulary through the church, through law, through science, that roughly a quarter of the English words you know are of Latin origin. The very alphabet forming the words in this sentence is, essentially, the Roman alphabet. Adapted from the Etruscans and Greeks, carried across Europe by Roman soldiers and administrators, and now used by the majority of the world's written languages. So how did all of this collapse? Slowly, painfully. Not in one moment, but across 2 centuries of accumulating pressure. Political instability meant emperors were assassinated or overthrown at an alarming rate. The economy strained under the cost of defending an empire too vast to administer efficiently. And beginning in the late 300s, waves of Germanic peoples, themselves displaced by the Huns, pushing in from the east, crossed into Roman territory. In 410, the Visigoths under Alaric did the unthinkable. They sacked the city of Rome itself. By the 470s, the Western Roman Empire existed mostly on paper. Real power sat with military commanders, many of them of Germanic origin, who propped up child emperors as figureheads. Romulus Augustulus was one of those figureheads, placed on the throne by his own father, a general named Orestes, and removed less than a year later by Odoacer's revolt. His deposition in 476 is the date historians usually cite as the fall of Rome. But that framing hides something important. The eastern half of the empire, centered in Constantinople, did not fall. It endured for nearly 1,000 more years, preserving Roman law, Roman administrative structures, and Greek culture, until finally falling to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. And even in the West, after Odoacer, Roman law kept governing the new Germanic kingdoms. Latin kept being spoken in courts and churches. Rome as a political empire ended. Rome as a set of ideas did not. Which brings us back to that quiet morning in Ravenna, and the boy handing over his crown. The laws Rome wrote still shape how courts across the world decide right from wrong.